I would now recognize our distinguished ranking member, Steve King, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate being recognized, and the thought that comes to mind as I listen to your opening statement is I'm wondering how the Eskimos got along all those centuries without fresh fruit and vegetables if it's a national security issue. However, before we start the testimony from the panel, I'd like to focus my remarks on protecting American workers. Illegal immigration, the lack of enforcement of our immigration laws, and today's jobs depression have formed a perfect storm for hurting Americans. The most important duty of the subcommittee is that we ensure our nation's immigration policy lifts up Americans, not holds them down. I find it hard to understand why some people carelessly claim that Americans won't do hard work. I find this claim insulting, as I am sure most hardworking Americans do. It's most insulting to those brave American soldiers who voluntarily risk their lives to defend our freedom and way of life every day, the men and women that take on terrorists in Iraq and Afghanistan, trek for miles across the desert with 70 or more pounds of gear and 100+ degree temperatures for about $8.09 an hour. And that includes the Marines. Maybe we should be spending less time watching Comedy Central and more time considering all the real jobs that are out there, ones that require real hard labor and don't involve sitting behind a desk. If we did, we'd realize that every day American workers perform the dirtiest, most difficult, most dangerous jobs that can be thrown at them. From crab fishermen that venture out into some of the roughest and most dangerous waters in the world, to the Joe the Plumbers of the world who many days would prefer the aroma of fresh dirt to that of the sewage from American elitists who disparage them even as they flush. These are real Americans doing real jobs, tasks that simply must get done. When American workers are treated with respect and paid for the labor, that they will do any job and they'll outwork anyone on earth. America's spirit is hardworking, and so are the people that comprise this great nation. Let's move on to agriculture. I represent a rural district made up mostly of farmers and farm communities, and the people of Iowa know what it takes to manage and effectively run a farm. One issue with attracting more American workers to seasonal agricultural labor is that most migrant workers are consigned to perpetual poverty. I wish that the United Farm Workers Union today understood, as Cesar Chavez clearly did, the devastating impact that illegal immigration has on American farm workers. Of course, it is argued by Tom Vilsack, President Obama's Secretary of Agriculture, that food prices would be 3, 4, or 5 times more if it were not for illegal immigrant workers. This is blatantly false and can't be supported by any data, and he doesn't even bother to defend himself. Data from the Secretary's own Department of Agriculture and the Bureau of Labor Statistics show that labor costs only represent 6% of the price consumers pay for fresh fruits and vegetables. You could double the pay of workers and see only a 6% increase in consumer prices. Highly respected agricultural economist Philip Martin of the University of California notes that if there was a 40% increase in farm wages, the average household would spend only $8 more a year on fruits and vegetables, less than the price of a movie ticket. I'm sure that most Americans would gladly pay $8 more a year in order to ensure a legal workforce. Cheap labor is just not worth illegal immigration's cost to Americans as workers or as taxpayers. The reality is, employers hire desperate aliens who will work for much less than Americans, driving wages down and making it impossible for American workers to compete. As Ranking Member Smith has pointed out many times in the past, there are 8 million illegal immigrants in the workforce competing against the 15.4 million Americans who are officially counted as unemployed, which includes the 80 million who are simply not in the workforce because they've dropped out and are no longer looking for jobs, and they are of working age. Americans have given up looking for those jobs because wages have been depressed and job opportunities eliminated by low-skilled and very mobile immigration. The percent of teenagers who work has never been lower. Professor Carol Swain will testify today about the toll mass immigration has taken on minority communities. What's important to point out is that all of this started happening well before the recession. Professor George Borjas, now at Harvard University, did groundbreaking research on the impact of immigration in the 1980s and 90s on low-skilled American workers. Professors Andrew Sum and Paul Harrington and other researchers at the Center for Labor Market Studies at Northeastern University found in 2005 that, given, and I quote, given large job losses among the nation's teens, 20 to 24-year-olds with no four-year degree, black males, and poorly educated native-born men, it is clear that native-born workers have been displaced in recent years because of immigration." Close quote. It's amazing to me that amnesty advocates simply ignore the 80 million labor pool. We can either feed, clothe, and house them, or put them to work to feed and clothe the world. The current economic crisis only magnifies the impact on American workers and families, but unless our immigration policies are changed, American workers and families will continue to be undermined even after the economy turns the corner. The Heritage Foundation found that the average household headed by an immigrant household and without a high school degree receives over $19,000 in total government benefits more than they pay in taxes from federal, state, and local. Cheap labor? You know, I think about the day that I had to swim out into a sewer lagoon and dive into 9 feet of fluid to retrieve a pump. And when I think about the day that it was 20 below and I'm in the water fixing a water line, and the warmest place there was in the water. The work that I've done in my life in the construction business and the work that we've put our workers through and the pride with which they take, it means that it's an insult to me to hear that Americans won't do this work. I can't think of a job that I have not been willing to do, and I can't think of an employee that I've had over the 28 years in the construction business that refused to do the work that was necessary. Americans will do that work, but they want to be paid a respectable wage for it. I look forward to the testimony, Madam Chair, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlemen.